Get going. Hey folks, thank you very much for inviting me to join you here today. I am looking forward to sharing some basics around GDK and getting started with contributing to the actual GitLab product. I think, Erin, you made some changes fairly recently, and very exciting to see other teams within GitLab starting to get interested into that process. Quick introduction: who am I and what does my team do? I'm Raymond. I am from the contributor success team. We look after the GitLab open source project as such, and that includes making our tooling available to our customers and our users and other open source contributors to make it easy for them to adopt, pick up, and get running with. More recently, we've been running the GitLab Co-Create program, where we are partnering up with customers to get customers enabled and going with the process of contributing to GitLab, whether they're doing that for reasons of just being able to skill up with and actually sort of see under the hood within GitLab, or even to with the idea to contribute specific functionality that they're needing or feeling missing or something. Everyone's motivations for contributing to open source do vary slightly. So it's really good to see some customers getting pretty solidly stuck into the co-create side of things, and we've had some really good successes with a couple of customers then going on to continue contributing even past the initial co-create engagement, which is really great to see. A couple of records we've just sort of hit. At the end of January, we hit our highest ever unique wider community contributors number at 184. So that's 184 wider community members, so non-GitLab staff contributing to GitLab in some way through merge requests and creating issues, contributing to issues. I think actually that's merge request contributors. So that's a record high for us, which is great. We're continually trying to grow that number, but at the same time, it's really cool to sometimes also be sharing these processes internally with teams, because this is a tool that we all use every day. And how I got started with GitLab contribution is I was using it. I ran into some issues, and those issues could be something as simple as my first code contribution. In fact, there was a couple of fields missing in one of the REST APIs, and I went and logged an issue. Then I looked at the issue backlog with 60,000 other issues, and I laughed at myself and I said, well, my little issue is never going to get looked at. So how hard can this be? I'd never touched Ruby before. I wasn't familiar with Ruby. So it was a whole interesting world for me. In fact, that particular contribution, I think, took me in total probably about 2 or 3 hours only. It was small, just adding a couple of fields. They were already in the API to read, so it was just a case of making them writable. And yeah, learned a whole bunch in the process. I wasn't running GDK, and I'll get to GDK in a moment. I wasn't running GDK when I made that change. So from a developer point of view, it was fairly painful, because I would make the change, push it up, create the merge request, wait for the pipeline to fail, which invariably did. Then I had to go back and try to decode the pipeline. Again, not being remotely familiar with Ruby or the GitLab pipeline and the way the GitLab tests code, that had its own challenges. But through the help of a very helpful reviewer and a little bit of patience, I managed to get it through. I think total time beginning to end was just less than 2 weeks. But yeah, the actual sort of time that I was actively busy with stuff was as short as sort of 2-3 hours. That one obviously unlocked the the desire to get further stuck in. And while I'd love to say that all contributions are only going to take a couple of hours here or there, the reality is that some contributions do take a fair amount longer. But having access to our tooling does hopefully speed that process up. So I've mentioned GDK, and that's really what the session is about, to give you all a bit of a primer around GDK. What is GDK? How does GDK help us? How can we run it? And yeah, anything to look at. Look out for. Sorry. So GDK is GitLab Development Kit. It is effectively a fully standalone instance of GitLab that runs on your machine with all of the sort of debugging and test widgets sort of switched on. What that does for us is it allows us to make a change to the code directly, go back to the browser, sort of refresh the page, and actually see if that code is doing something. So we can rinse and repeat. We can make changes fairly rapidly. Going back to that first example I mentioned about my API change, I would have been able to actually make API calls directly to my API running locally, and being able to see everything working or not working, as the case may be. What's also nice with GDK is that it does come with a bunch of data seeded in. So there's already a number of projects in there with almost sort of every object you might want to interact with in GitLab. So there's issues in there, there's merge requests, there's projects. So if for instance you wanted to go and change something on a merge request, or change something to do with merge requests, you wouldn't have to go and create a project, add a repo, push some commits up into that repo so that you can get to the point where you can actually go and create a merge request. That's already kind of all set up there, so you could actually quite quickly clone something out, add something in, or in fact, there's even existing merge requests that you could go and fiddle with. So because it's a whole GitLab environment, I'm sure that many of you have probably had some involvement with standing up GitLabs, or at least managing GitLabs or something in the line of the PS duty. Besides Aaron, has anyone else had any GitLab contribution development experience, or you just all sort of build external stuff helping customers adopt?
I've done a couple of contributions, but it's been probably like 3-4 years.
Okay, cool. Well, it's always good to understand that context. And yes, I think the GDK experience in the last 3-4 years has improved somewhat massively. We've been doing a lot of work with that. The team that was called Engineering Productivity is now part of Developer Experience. They are actively working on GDK all the time to make it easier and faster and less painful. I've had few major issues with GDK on my side, to be honest. But I know of other people in my team that have had like nothing but pain whenever they've tried to do anything in GDK. So it's one of those tools that, because there's so many moving parts in it, it can be a little bit painful to run. And hopefully what we can do here is just demystify some of that and sort of make it a little bit easier to figure it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share screen. I mentioned, I think while we were waiting to get started, I'm doing this off the cuff. So if questions along the way, do feel free to like slow me down, make me stop. I want to make this as valuable for you as possible. So yeah, do feel free to ask. So where do I find GDK? First thing, well, GDK is available as under the GitLab org project, under GitLab Development Kit. Now you don't have to go out and clone this repo, because that's going to just clone the repo. That's not actually doing the important thing. But if you scroll down into the README, there is some installation instructions. Now, one of the big things that GDK is fairly resource intensive. And this is probably one of the problems we often have with community contributors, is that they're coming with a development machine that may not have these sort of resources. We've even got a couple of contributors coming from Windows where they're actually trying to do this in a WSL sort of session on top of Windows, which works, but again, it's fairly resource hungry. The straightforward way, and the way that most people at GitLab, at least within engineering, run GDK, is through the one-line installation. The one-line installation, as it says, is literally just one line. You pull the install script down, you pipe it into Bash, and it's going to hopefully you sit back and it does what it needs to do. It might ask you a couple of questions along the way, so you maybe just need to sort of babysit a little bit. And there is some very small prerequisites. If you're on macOS, you need to have Xcode installed, and I think that's pretty much it. And I think Git, and then everything else GDK handles. And yeah, if you go and run that one-liner, it takes possibly anywhere from about half an hour to an hour, hour and a half, depending on your machine, because it's going to go and pull down all of the pieces of the puzzle that make a GitLab installation, compile things, including compiling Postgres and Ruby from source, to make it all kind of work. So it's not a quick process. So I certainly don't expect anyone to be able to do that here on the call, sort of while we wait. That said, installing GDK that way is great if you're going to be using GDK daily or using GDK at least regularly, because you can keep it up to date. It's running natively, and you will probably know your way around it a fair amount. Outside that process, there is a couple of other tools that we've built more recently to maybe make GDK a little bit more accessible to somebody who isn't using it every day, isn't using it daily. So we do have, and I'll actually just drop this link on the chat, but we've got these docs which are out there for our contributor community. Just because they're for our wider community doesn't mean that internal teams can't use them. But effectively, what we've got here is there is a number of other routes to getting GDK up and running. One of those is GDK in a box, where we have pre-built VMs, VirtualBox for Intel machines, or a tool called UTM for Apple Silicon. These are not small VMs. I think they're chunky. They're also sort of 10 to 15 gigs, but at least there you should be able to pull that VM image down, get a copy of GDK up and running fairly quickly, and you don't have to sit and wait for the install process to happen, because that's already happened in the building of the image. If you do use these, by all means, please do come and drop our team a message if you do experiencing any issues with them. The more we know about issues with these things, the more we can do to fix them. A couple of other options are out there. One of them is Gitpod. So Gitpod is a third party that we use, which offers cloud development environments. So you could use Gitpod. Actually, as a GitLab team member, you'll get more than like 10 hours a month or something. So that's less of an issue. But yeah, Gitpod is a viable option, again, especially if maybe your machine is a little bit busy doing other things. Then you don't have to worry about actually running any of that stuff on your local machine, because it's all running in a cloud. Additionally, what we also have is, and it's not documented very well yet, but we are in the process of trying to change that. We do have GDK running under remote workspaces. Well, it's just called workspaces now. So in the GDK project, you can fire up the GitLab Development project, and you can start a new workspace, and that will actually create there's a cluster available to all GitLab team members, and that will go and create a GDK instance for you in a cluster and give you access to that, which is, again, great if you want to be able to do stuff without completely overloading your machine. That is currently only available to team members. We are looking at actually extending that out to community contributors in the next quarter. I'm busy working with that as we speak, and looking at how we sort of set up a cluster and get some of our community contributors access to that, so that we can start to use our own tools and our own cloud development environments for development. The last piece in the puzzle is I'm also in the process of adding a containerized version of GDK. Now, this is a single container that runs all of the pieces of GDK inside that container. It's effectively just the GDK in a box VM built as a container. In my mind, it's a lot easier to run because I don't have to now go and run a hypervisor like UTM or VirtualBox or anything. I'm already running containers in my machine, so I can spin that up. There is another tool out there called GCK. You may have heard of it. If you have, that's great. If you've actually used it, even better. If you've managed to make it work for you, fantastic. But I'm not going to delve into that right now. I think you need a very solid understanding of some of the internal architectures, because GCK runs as a Docker Compose stack with multiple containers, and it can be interesting to get running and make run. So I'm not going to focus on that for now. But what I am going to do is take you through sort of standing up GDK. So I'm going to use the container right now because it is was one of my preferred things. I also use a local install, but the container is nice because my local install is mature and I've been doing stuff on it, so the container works for me. So in this case, this is the container. Like I say, it's still in a merge request, so it's not running off of main. Hopefully, we will have this sorted in the next even couple of weeks, where we will then be able to pull that off of a main tag or something and have it regularly rebuild. But yeah, so it's got a bit of a line to get going, but that goes and starts up a container in the background, and you can see that something's running. Now, when you follow the GDK in a box installation, there's a couple of commands here that we run to set up an SSH key so that we can SSH into that machine. And then there's a script that handles like a first-time setup, which just makes sure that we can get into the machine. So that is, I've previously run these on I've previously run this on my side, which allows me to get into that machine. So if I do SSH gdk.local, yes, it's a container. I shouldn't necessarily need to SSH into the container, but yeah, needs must. So we're actually in the container here, but what I can do also is I can fire up. I've just realized you're probably not seeing my terminal, are you? I'm not sharing my whole screen, so let me change how I'm sharing. Nobody mentioned that they were just seeing my browser and my cursor moving around, which means that everyone's either asleep or not watching too closely, neither of which I'm sure is the right answer. Okay, that should be better now. Can anyone see my terminal that's just come up?
Yeah, we can see it.
Well, we
Okay,
could.
cool.
There we go. There we go.
Okay, so you can see it, right? So what I was saying there when I was kind of pointing at the terminal and no one was seeing anything is I've got the container pulled down. It's a very chunky container for a container. It's like 13 gig container, but I've got the container pulled down and I've just started it up. So a Docker PS, I can see that it is running. It's got a whole bunch of ports mapped in, and I can actually SSH into it and drop out of it. One of the reasons we do it with the SSH is because it then allows us to go and do some cute things with VS Code. And I've got VS Code here. So if I do connect to host on VS Code, I can say connect to GDK local. Get rid of all my other VS Code windows. And so this is actually running through the remote SSH feature in VS Code. Everything in the context of this VS Code browser is actually happening inside that container. And in fact, I am inside that container. So I don't have that command, but I can see that I am running in that container. Right, I'm running macOS, but we're inside the Debian container here. So I can go ahead and open folder, and that would be the GitLab folder. And here we go. We've got the checkout of, yes, I trust the authors. We've got the checkout of the GitLab code base here. And that's running. And there's some suggested extensions. We can install those. But while that's all happening there, I've also got GDK should be up if I try to speak to it here. And 3000 is one of the ports that we are mapping through to the container. We can see that over there. It's happening. My machine might not be very happy about it, but it's happening. But yeah, so it's pretty busy because it's doing a whole bunch of things in the background. And we also doing the VS Code thing, but here we go. So we should all recognize this screen. Hopefully someone's seen it before. But because we're in GDK, all GDK instances come out of the box with some default credentials. So it's just, if we drop to the terminal, and we can type GDK status, will show us all the different services that are running. Again, if you're familiar with running or at least interfacing with a GitLab instance at a command line, you should be fairly, let's just stop that. Can I stop that? It's not stopping. There's a bunch of things bunch of processes kicked off in the background that my machine is now grinding to a halt, which is always great because that means that things will be kicked. There we go. Something was happening eventually. Okay, that's not big enough. Okay, so yeah, anyone who's run like GitLab Kettle status or something on a machine running GitLab should be somewhat familiar with this. But you can see that we've got a bunch of services, all our GitLab services, Postgres, etc., running on the machine, and that tells us where we can find our instance of GDK. This still doesn't tell us how to get into that. So if I just type the GDK command by itself, wow, I really need to stop this indexing. Give me a sec. Disable. Uninstall. Okay, it's still supposedly doing that, but yes, if I just type the GDK command by itself, that should go ahead and spit out all the different options that we can actually use with the GDK command. So the GDK command allows us to check the status of our GDK, which could be starting, stopping services, etc. What I'm actually going to do is, because I don't need the VS Code side, let's keep the VS Code side up. I'll kill that. I'll come back to that. If my machine is copying. Yes. So just running the GDK command itself will give you a bunch of output, including things like GDK start, that's how you restart and stop different processes. GDK tail is if you want to check the logs of all or a specific service. You can connect into pSQL if you need to do things directly into the database. I strongly recommend against that. GDK Rails will give you access to do stuff in the Rails console or Rails commands. And as you can see, there's a whole bunch of other things within the GDK command that allows you to do things, including an important command, which is GDK Doctor. GDK Doctor will kind of help us diagnose any issues that we may have with our GDK, and often we'll say, oh, you need to go and install this or that or whatever the case is. And yeah, GDK Doctor is pretty helpful. But most importantly, at the bottom of that gives us our default credentials. Now, these default credentials, anytime you install GDK on any of the sort of platforms, you'll get used to that password, and the user is root. Just gonna log that in. I get rid of that. That's really small. Sorry, I'm not actually at my desk, so I'm just on a single screen right now. So I'm trying to fit it all in. That should be logging in. See, that's probably fairly busy. A bunch of things ticking away, background jobs, kicking off. It's sort of my container runtime VM is fairly small with 8 gigs of memory, so it's pretty full in terms of that. So my GDK is a little bit small there. The more headroom you can give that, that VM, the better.
Maybe a side question while this is running, Raymond. Like things like, for example, testing code for Gitly or Prefect, which is, I think, not part of the GitLab project. Is this also part of GDK? Now that when I saw Prefect, I was thinking about it.
Absolutely. So you'll see that my directory here is GitLab Development Kit, GitLab. And when you install the GDK, it goes and checks out all of these projects into individual folders within that within the GDK project, or within the GitLab Development Kit folder. So if I go one folder up, okay, what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to stop. So the first time you log in, it's going to say you've logged in, new user, reset your password, and then it's going to take you to the GDK login page. I'm going to actually stop my I'm going to stop my container, and I'm going to start up my native GDK, because my native GDK is actually a little bit faster. So you can see I'm using status, all my services are down, and GDK start. It will start everything up. And yeah, so as I mentioned, within the GitLab Development Kit folder, we've got all these projects checked out. I realize I'm pointing at my screen. So we've got these projects checked out. So if I look in here, we've got Gitly, we've got the GitLab project, we've got GitLab Pages, GitLab Shell. Many of these projects are actually created in here. So if I open up Gitly, see you can actually see where. So I can make changes to this Gitly, and it's going to affect the Gitly running within my GDK environment. Absolutely. By default, GDK comes with a set of services that are automatically switched on, so you can see those with the. But maybe you needed to do something with Elasticsearch or Zookt, or one of the other services that come as a part of a working GitLab installation, and that's where the docs within GDK are pretty comprehensive. So if you wanted to sort of go and actually look at some of the details, I've never particularly done anything directly with Gitly myself, but there is a specific doc on how to get stuck into some of the pieces, including you can disable prefect if you want. You can add additional nodes. So there is in your GDK folder, there's a gdk.yaml file. And this says which services you're running, services that you're not running, etc. And you can switch on or off services, or in fact actually go and configure certain specific configurations to these services. And the same way that you would do a GitLab kettle reconfigure on a GitLab instance, you do a GDK reconfigure, and it will go and reconfigure everything and make things work. So you can see here, in fact, I've got Elasticsearch and Zookt disabled, but I had enabled them at some point to make some changes with them in the past. And yeah, so that's what you'd see. So again, for these, you can make changes within your GDK YAML file. You can add prefect nodes, Gitly nodes, and yeah, so if you wanted to make a change to something in Gitly, you would be working in this project here. So this is, it's a detached head in this case, but you can see it is plugged up to the upstream project, so you can pull from that project. You can create a branch, you can make some changes and restart the local Gitly service just the same way that you would if you were just developing it separately. But the benefit of that is that it is tied into your GDK instance. So yeah, any of the other building blocks of GitLab that you needed to work on, you can still work on with GDK. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
So now mine should have started. So let's just have a look there. GDK status, everything's been ticking up. So should be able to. Do you want to allow connections? If you don't say yes there, you're going to have some strange failures when things don't magically don't work, because your Mac and firewalls. But yeah, as we can see here, we've got back to our standard login page. And I've got a safe login in my 1Password, which is helpful. And there we go. So we're logged in. You can see the projects that are here. There's a bunch of users that are in there. There's a number of things. One thing to mention is that by default, GDK comes without a license. So if you needed to do anything with any of the licensed features, you then need to get yourself a license. There is a link. I'll drop it on the chat after the call because I've got to go find it. There's a very easy process as a GitLab team member to get yourself a development license, and you'll just get a license that you can then load into your GDK. I don't know why my mouse is moving. I think I know why my mouse is moving. Let's just go and someone's at my desk. Just give me a second. So disconnect that. But yeah, that's so. In my case, I've got a license in there, so that allows me access to all of the plans, and as a team member, that's doable. If somebody was external to GitLab and they were contributing, they would be contributing as a wider community member. And there is another link that someone would use to basically send a request through to my team to ask for a development license for GDK, which we absolutely grant, because we want people to be able to make the changes to the project as and when. So the one sort of last sort of piece I probably want to show is the one thing I usually like to do, just to show how live the environment actually is. So if I just open up VS Code. Okay, so when I was showing so cool, now I've got GitLab, I've got the code checked out. How do I find anything? Okay, so one of the things that I like to show is that because we're running in a dev mode, Rails is kind enough to show us all of these little comments as we look at the code of a page. So if we go and open project, for instance, we'll actually see exactly which pieces of front-end files are being rendered to make different parts of the UI actually appear, which is nice, because it helps us and aids us in discovery. So if I just say inspect on there, for instance, I can see that this box where it has the project name here is being rendered under app views projects _ home panel .html.haml. So if I go and open that here, so for anyone not familiar with Haml, Haml is one of the templating engines that Ruby on Rails uses by default. If you look and squint at this code, I don't know why my browser has disappeared there, but it somewhat matches up with the code that gets rendered into HTML. But what we can see here is this is the fragment of HTML that actually gets rendered to make on the project. And if we were to do something like take that, wrap that in quotes, wrap that in braces, and make a silly change like that, what that's a little bit for us. And if we were going to reload this page, because I also still have Rancher Desktop running. So let's kill Rancher Desktop, because we really don't need to be fighting for resources. Should be stopping. fun of doing demos. I'm sure you probably experience this all the time.
It's not a demo if it works smoothly the first time.
I heard a reality machine refresh by the time I get there. So exactly. It's not a demo unless it's you don't know it's real and live unless you actually see it. This has completely the source of a lot of my grief right now. Let's just stop that request. Machine's not ready. Hopefully, once this page does reload, you'll see that even without restarting services, a point of the GDK interpreted language, there's no compilation required. Reload the page and Rails should serve us the updated version of that page. Now, the front-endy pieces that are running in Vue, we have in the GDK stack. Yeah, that's in the GDK stack. We have a service called Vite, which you wouldn't see in a production environment of GDK. You'll probably see something called Webpack. Webpack and or Vite are our sort of on-demand JavaScript compilers. So they're the things that would take control of and take care of providing that stuff for you. So okay, well, hopefully that's gone. Okay, that's disappeared for now. My machine's still cooking a little bit, but that's maybe just Firefox. Let's try to refresh that page and see if magic. Oh yay. Something else is broken. But I think this is just a symptom of my machine having, I think that's actually going to say, yeah, my machine is really just battling. So probably what I have to do here is status. So I think my machine's probably started swapping stuff. But yeah, when that comes back, hopefully we'll be able to demo the actual change there. And that sort of really brings me to the end. And I realize I've probably taken a lot more than the 30 minutes. I've taken a little bit more than the 30 minutes I sort of said I would take. But hopefully this is a good sort of like intro into what GDK is, what GDK does, where to get it, what you can do with it. I'm happy to answer any questions now if there are any, or absolutely if you come up with anything or you have questions along the way or you wanted to try stuff, feel free to badger me in Slack. And I'm quite happy to answer questions and help you. Or if you do try to get GDK running and your GDK is giving you grief, like mine is right now, or even like any other issues, I'm happy to sort of help you debug those and figure it out.
I got one question before we're wrapping this up. In your experience with the container-based GDK versus the VM-based GDK, which one do you feel is more heavy on the performance, or more resource intensive? Do you think the container is more lightweight than the VM, or vice versa?
I find the container easier to work with, but that's because I prefer just container sort of paradigms over VM side of things. I find the container more lightweight from a space point of view because again, you're pulling the image down once, you can start up the container, you can throw the container away, you can just restart another one, or if I've broken that one, I can stop it, I can start up a copy doing exactly the same thing, but that copy is not really taking any more space. Whereas if I do the VM thing, I've either got to have a copy of that VM image, or if I do something and I want to try doing something else in a clean GDK, I've got to go and download that VM again separately and sort of stop the one and start the other. So the VM paradigm is a little bit heavier on space, and I find I battle with this disk on my machine, so that always gets fun. They're chunky downloads, but once you actually extract things, they're even bigger. So I think it's just like 20 to 30 gigs worth of space to get that VM image running. So my preference is the container side, and I think the way we're heading as a team is probably to deprecate the VMs over the container, purely also because the VMs require us to manually update them. So they're only like the build as they stand is currently a point in time. We've looked at like using like Packer or something else to like generate those and build those, but there's a fair amount of lifting to just make that work smoothly. Whereas the container, it's just running in a Docker file. It's CI. It's just like automatically there, and it's already, we've already got a lot of those processes and systems running. So it's just easier for us to keep that maintained. And then when a contributor picks it up, they know straight away that, hey, this was built yesterday, or this was built last week.
Yeah, that makes sense. I lean towards using a container instead of like a VM as well. And having tried to get the GCK to work years ago, seeing this get as far as you got in the last 30 minutes, that I've got a lot of confidence in trying out this approach. Have you all run into any issues? You're running like Docker for your container, Damon, right? Have you run into any issues with other container-based systems? Like I use Podman, so I've run into some issues between Podman running a Docker container versus just running it straight in Docker. So like I don't know if you all have seen that with the GDK container.
So I'm running Roger Desktop, which is like effectively Docker under the hood. I believe it should run under Podman. I think I worked with a community contributor who was giving it a try, and they did get it running under Podman. So there shouldn't be any inherent issues with it. It's not asking for any magic that anything else is doing. So it's just a container at the end of it. Yeah, we've done stuff inside it. We've really like inside it, we really treat it like a VM. So it does sudo and stuff. So if you've got something that's going to stop you changing your perceived UID from a runtime point of view, you might need to be able to disable that. But it doesn't require access to the container runtime at all. It just within the GDK processes, at some points there is a sudo, so you can actually within the container sudo and apt install something if you wanted to. But it should run under Podman, and I'd be keen to know if you do try it, what your mileage is and how you get along.
Yeah, I'll definitely let you know if I run into any nuances with it, and yeah, fingers crossed that running it in Podman isn't going to be too different. I'm hoping it's going to be
Cool.
pretty much fine, because where I've run into issues between Podman and Docker is once you start getting creative with some of the more nuanced configurations of a container, not just spin up the container and expose some ports. So yeah, looking forward to trying that out.
This is pretty straightforward from that side of things, and spin up a container and expose some ports. So it should be fairly easy and plain sailing. So as you can see here, I refreshed my page, my machine finally calmed down, and that is now there. But now, because we changed that at the home panel for all projects, any project I open is actually going to do that. So there isn't another one at a flight. So that's probably not the best place for me to go. But if I open up, there is a project called GitLab org, or a group called GitLab org with some projects in it. So if I open up one of these projects, you can see that every project I open now is going to give me this little bit of extra text, which is great. Silly example, but it's just interesting to see how dynamic that code is. So if I go back in here and I just take out all those changes that I did to the file, revert it back to what it was before. Now, hopefully, if I just refresh the page, we didn't restart GDK in between. If I refresh the page, my machine behaves, then we can see that that change has actually gone through and fixed. A couple of other tips I can maybe give in terms of finding where stuff is. So obviously, when you're working from a front end point of view, it's easy enough to find something because you've either got those little helpful hints in the inspect type window. If you're trying to do something back-endy, it's maybe a little bit harder to find, or whatever the case is. Couple of tips I can offer is, one, grep is your friend. I've found most of whatever I need to find in the code base using things like grep. And yeah, that's probably the best way to navigate stuff, especially while you're still fairly unfamiliar with the code base. And then the one last sort of thing I wanted to touch on that GDK does allow us to do is we can run tests. So let's see what we can do. So this is probably going to be a massive spec, and it's probably going to do a lot of things. But if you were making a change to projects, for instance, and you wanted to, or to the project model, and you wanted to actually go and run those tests locally so that you didn't have to wait for CI to come back and complain about things, then that's you can absolutely run those tests locally, make a change, run the test, make a change, run the test, or if you're actually developing the tests, run them without having to push them into CI and wait. So yeah, I'll cancel that, but that's all visible there. See, there's some other bits. Oh, okay. Thank you for sharing the team member licenses stuff. Yes, GDK Rancher stress test. All right. Hopefully that was helpful. And yeah, like I said, any questions, do feel free to reach out to me along the way, further down the line. And yeah, looking forward to seeing some contributions coming out of y'all.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Raymond.
Cool. Well, have a great rest of your day. Hopefully it's the end of some of your days. And have a good weekend, everyone. And yeah, catch you soon.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.